Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Michael Benson. Eddie Hearn has named Derek Chisora versus Chris Arreola as a heavyweight fight he wants to make in 2022. Chris Arreola would be a bit of a break, a bit of a breather from the kind of guys that Derek Chisora has been fighting in his last 3 fights. Alexander Usyk, Joseph Parker 2 times, guys who are younger with a bit more upside than Chris Arreola has here today. I don't know if the British boxing fans have the stomach for a matchup like this, depending on how it's billed. If it's billed as a decorative item on the undercard of a big fight, well, I think they could go for it as a decorative item. But as a standalone main event...
Yeah, I don't know about that.
On the heels of his latest loss to Joseph Parker, Derek Chisora has no intentions of retiring. He said he won't be fighting well into his 40s, but he didn't give a conclusive date as to when he's going to call it a career. He's 37 years old now. He'll be 38 in about 2 days.
Coming off 3 back-to-back losses.
Chisora versus Arreola is a fight that makes sense on the undercard of Joshua versus Usyk, for example. A big card that features a very big fight, a very big main event. I'm not sure that that's what Eddie Hearn has in mind. I'm just throwing ideas around.
Maybe that's what he's thinking?
Derek was in a very rough and tumble fight, a very physically taxing fight. His last outing, not that long ago, against Joseph Parker. He was dropped multiple times. He took a lot of hard shots. Derek Chisora showed his durability and vulnerability all in one fell swoop, all in the same fight. Thus, a fight with Chris Arreola, there's a precedence for it.
There is.
Chris Arreola is in a very similar place in his career to Derek.
And it could be a fun little fight because neither guy has anything to lose.
Both combatants fight that way. So as a decorative item on the undercard of a bigger card, big main event, I could see this being a good idea, though as a standalone main event, not so much.
The question as to how safe it is for Derek to keep fighting in these kinds of fights.
There's a precedence to ask that question, though Derek Chisora himself, he seems to resent it.
Because he's earning a living, this is what he does.
Well, he is, and he has been since 2007, 2008. Derek, he's not after world titles, you understand.
He's just making the rounds and making bank.
Really can't fault him for that, and so long as he retains that following of his, that loyal following, his paying public, his paying customers.
The ones that know he's going to put on a show.
In victory or defeat, depending who's opposite the ring of Derek.
Yeah, you can still get out there and make some cash.
Other news per tweet from Michael Benson. Golovkin versus Murata looks like it will be rescheduled for March or April, according to Eddie Hearn.
Gennady's in the same age group as Derek Chisora.
With the difference being that Gennady has sat out all of 1 year. Gennady is a reigning world champion, unlike Derek.
And because he's a world champion, there are expectations.
Oh, I understand why Gennady Golovkin is prioritizing the Murata fight above all other fights the middleweight division has to offer. All other unification matches, I should say. I understand it. I get it.
In a nutshell, he's doing what Sergio Martinez did to him.
I've often told you guys here on the channel that the Murata fight is a bigger fight fiscally
It is.
in Japan for Gennady Golovkin. It's a bigger fight fiscally than either the Demetrius Andrade fight or Jermall Charlo fight would have been here in America. That Murata has more marquee value in the land of the rising sun than either of those fighters have here stateside. So in that way, I understand what's happening, but I also understand that Gennady Golovkin is doing to those two fighters what Sergio Martinez did to him years ago. He's putting them on the back burner for the money fight the way he was put on the back burner for a money fight. The money fight with Miguel Cotto. Seems like ancient history now, but not so ancient to me, not from where I'm sitting. It wasn't that long ago, in my mind, that Sergio Martinez was accused of ducking Gennady Golovkin. Sergio Martinez, the then reigning WBC middleweight champion. It wasn't that long ago that Gennady supporters accused Sergio Martinez of avoiding that fighter. And I sympathized, I understood, and I agreed that given Sergio Martinez being a champion, a reigning champion, there was a precedence to say that he was avoiding Gennady Golovkin.
If my memory serves me, Gennady was his mandatory challenge.
If my memory serves me, Sergio Martinez prioritized fighting a naturally smaller fighter in Miguel Cotto. A naturally smaller fighter fought Miguel Cotto at a catchweight because at that time Miguel Cotto represented a greater financial value to the aging Sergio Martinez, the then aging champion.
There's a very obvious parallel there between those two situations and those two fighters.
Sergio Martinez and Gennady Golovkin. I reiterate, Sergio prioritized the money fight over the Golovkin fight and all the ways that Golovkin is prioritizing the money fight over the Demetrius Andrade fight. With the difference being that Gennady's big money fight at middleweight, it is a unification match, though whether or not it was actually necessary to miss all of 2021.
That's where the duck is.
You got a lot of guys right now accusing Demetrius Andrade of ducking Yanni Bekalim Kanuli, who was very recently ordered to fight Demetrius in defense of Demetrius's title. They'll call Demetrius moving up to 168 pounds to pursue a Canelo Alvarez fight and potentially become a 3-division champion. They'll call that a duck.
But there's nowhere near as vocal when it comes to Gennady.
Gennady didn't have to sit out all of 2021 waiting to have a unification match. He didn't have to travel, doesn't have to travel all the way to Japan to unify titles and make big money in the process. He could have done that here stateside with Demetrius Andrade. And granted that the Ryota Murata fight really does represent a greater financial value than an Andrade fight, all the same.
If he viewed Demetrius as easy to beat, he would have fought him.
Because there was plenty of time to do it. Gennady Golovkin sat out all of 2021, but that wasn't necessary. That was by design.
If you ask me, he didn't want to jeopardize that Murata fight.
If Demetrius Andrade were as terrible a boxer as his critics make him out to be, then surely Gennady Golovkin would have found time this year to take that guy's world title and make a couple of $1 million in the process, because the zone would have paid him handsomely for that fight. Perhaps not as handsomely as he'll get paid for the Murata fight, though all the same, they weren't going to give that guy chump change.
He still seems interested in unifying titles.
Just not when it comes to Demetrius Andrade. I mean, the bottom line here is that if you were one of those guys 4, 5, 6 years ago saying that Sergio Martinez was ducking Gennady Golovkin.
Well, you could say the same thing about Gennady Golovkin here today.
You could say the exact same thing about Gennady, who sat out all of this year, fought absolutely no one.
Demetrius Andrade was an option.
It was always an option, but Gennady, he didn't want to know. He'd rather sit out the entirety of 2021 waiting for a safer choice, a safer option in Ryota Murata, who's less experienced than Gennady as a professional, less experienced than Demetrius Andrade, and far
less active than both.
Demetrius Andrade has fought in the last 12 months. He fought 2 times this calendar year.
Whereas Gennady hasn't fought in the last 12 months.
Gennady hasn't fought in a year, and Ryota Murata hasn't fought in 2. He hasn't fought in the last 2 years.
You don't need to wonder why Gennady's so focused on that guy.
Because it's not an either-or situation, and it never was. As if Gennady could only choose one champion to fight. As if it was either it's this guy or it's that guy, when in reality, him sitting out all of this year, he had time to squeeze in an Andrade fight en route to a Ryota Murata fight.
It's not like he couldn't fit both guys into the schedule. He could have.
If he wanted to, he could have, and it's not like he wouldn't have made money fighting Demetrius Andrade. DAZN would have paid him handsomely for that fight.
It's not like there were any network and promotional politics to have to sort through.
I'm just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give it to you. If years ago you were beating the drum for Gennady Golovkin to get that Sergio Martinez fight, if you were saying all those years ago that Sergio was ducking Gennady Golovkin, you could say the exact same thing about Gennady here today.
The Murata fight isn't a bad fight.
But Gennady didn't have to miss out all of this year in order to get it. If he missed out all of this year, it's because he was preserving himself.
Nobody keeps the same energy for guys in this sport.
If you thought that Sergio was ducking Gennady Golovkin by prioritizing a money fight with Miguel Cotto, you could apply that same logic to Gennady Golovkin here today at the end of 2021, because he seems to be avoiding Demetrius Andrade.
He's avoiding Andrade because he's prioritizing a money fight with Murata.
It's the same fucking thing. Stop trying to explain it away.
Didn't wait all year for Murata. Just Murata for no reason.
You guys, you didn't have that sympathy for an aging Sergio Martinez way back when, and I didn't either. It's for this reason that I don't have that sympathy for Gennady. Here now, I'm keeping the same energy. But are you? And finally, top-ranked President Todd Dubov says Lomachenko wants Kambosos. We'll try to make it for first half of 2022. Lomachenko has made it very evident to us and to his team that Kambosos is the fight he would like. We are amicably trying to have discussions with them for a fight in the first half of next year. Todd Dubov, president at Top Rank. For those who don't know, that's Bob Arum's son-in-law. Lomachenko is a poster boy for many things in the sport. He was aggressively matched. He came right out of the amateurs and fought for a world title in his second fight. He doesn't look at a setback as his value going down.
He looks at it as a reset to go forward.
He has come back with 2 brilliant wins, and he never says no to any opponents. He wants his titles back. And this news comes as a surprise to no one, me least of all. I've been telling you guys, this is what's going to happen. This is what they're going to do. This is what they're going to pursue. And George Kambosos Jr., he's got to make a choice.
Because very soon Vasyl Lomachenko may not leave him with one.
I know that George would like to revel in his victory over Teofimo Lopez, his big upset win, what I think is the biggest upset of this year.
Enjoy
He
it.
may want to revel in that, but he doesn't have the time to.
Time is of the essence.
He is this division's newly crowned, unified, and/or undisputed champion to some, simply unified to others, and his reign is under grave threat.
Serious threat of coming to an abrupt end.
I feel like a Devin Haney fight might very well be of a greater financial value to George Kambosos Jr. if Matchroom can get it over the line, if Devin Haney is willing to make sacrifices and be realistic.
George might make more money fighting Devin than he'd make fighting Loma.
But they have a very limited window of opportunity to make that fight in a timely fashion so that George can at least make some scratch, make some serious cash before he is so confronted with Vasyl Lomachenko, because regardless of whether or not he fights Devin or doesn't fight Devin, Loma's coming.
He's coming for those belts.
Todd Dubove characterizes Vasyl Lomachenko as being a poster boy for many things in the sport, and I don't disagree with him. Listen,
Look.
I'm not one of these guys who was head over heels.
No, I didn't think Vasyl Lomachenko was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I still don't.
I think he's an excellent boxer with an excellent amateur background, an excellent professional record, a fighter that's easy to like, a fighter that's easy to enjoy and appreciate. I think these things.
But I wasn't a Lomachenko extremist.
I wasn't an extremist or a detractor for that matter. I wasn't one of these malcontent guys.
Got all this resentment for this Ukrainian fighter.
So fucking resentful, so fucking mad, always so fucking mad.
Give it a rest, Toots.
That whole narrative about Vasyl Lomachenko ducking Devin Haney, being afraid of him, gross oversight.
That situation had less to do with Devin and Loma and more to do with Bob and Eddie.
Can't tell you how many times I've had to revisit that subject here on the channel. That situation involving Vasyl Lomachenko's ascent, if you will, to franchise status. That really does have more to do with Bob and Eddie than it had to do with Loma and Devin. It's simple, really. Bob Arum knew that Eddie Hearn was going to try to get at least one Vasyl Lomachenko fight on DAZN, and he was going to use the Devin Haney situation, Devin Haney being Vasyl Lomachenko's mandatory challenger, as the avenue of opportunity to do it.
He had already tried it with Anthony Crolla.
Vasyl Lomachenko's WBA mandatory challenger, Anthony Crolla, who Bob Arum, in his own words, said he had to overpay to ensure that the fight stayed on ESPN and didn't travel to DAZN.
Eddie was trying to get Lomachenko to fight on DAZN.
He tried it once with Vasyl Lomachenko's WBA mandatory challenger, Anthony Crolla, and he was set to try it again with his WBC mandatory challenger, Devin Haney.
Bob Arum stopped him before he could get the chance.
Long before an order from the WBC would have come down. The people over there at Top Rank petitioned to have Vasyl Lomachenko made into a franchise champion in order to keep the way clear for a Teofimo Lopez unification match. Did you guys forget? That was their plan all along. That's what that was all about. They didn't want Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, and Devin Haney interrupting.
It was their plan to match Vasyl Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez.
But he's got a real case of convenient amnesia. Did everybody forget that that's what Top Rank was angling for? They wanted to match Vasyl Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez.
who at that time was a more proven fighter than Devin.
You know, if he would have skipped out on Lopez, they would have accused him of ducking Lopez. As it stands, he skips out on Haney, and they accuse him of ducking Haney.
Even if it was to fight Lopez.
Even if the entire situation has more to do with Bob and Eddie than it has to do with Devin and Loma. I'll tell you now, I don't think Vasyl Lomachenko had or has anything to be afraid of in Devin Haney. Not yesterday and not here today.
And it's not because Devin's a bad fighter. Devin's not a bad fighter. He's a good fighter.
But that situation had more to do with the feud between Bob and Eddie than it had to do with Devin and Loma. Those are just facts. That's just the truth.
Todd both says Lomachenko's a poster boy for many things in the sport.
Legacy is one among them. At a time when younger fighters, much younger fighters than Vasyl Lomachenko, are trying to find shortcuts to superstardom in the sport of boxing. Fighters like Ryan Gersha, fighters like Gervonta Davis. At a time when those guys ain't none too interested in challenging George for what he's got.
Ryan wants to fight Isaac Cruz.
Gervonta Davis, who the hell knows who he's gonna fight? I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see the Rolly Romero fight get rescheduled.
Those guys ain't vying to become unified and or undisputed champions.
Neither of them, they're not. Teofimo Lopez, he was, but he got a little bit too big for his britches.
He did.
Bit of a big head, too big for his own good, and
He lost the belts, and now he's going up to 140.
he lost the belts. He beat Vasyl Lomachenko for his very next fight, his very first title defense. Unsuccessful. Here we have Vasyl Lomachenko still staying the course, still pursuing the same goal, trying to achieve the same dream, becoming this division's undisputed champion. And the story is, if he's got to go to Australia to do it, then that's what he's willing to do.
I don't know how willing Devin is to travel to Australia.
And don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying he is unwilling.
But they're saying you're willing to go down there and do the fight, and actually going down there and doing the fight.
Don't forget that Vasyl Lomachenko has already shown us he's willing to travel, even as the A-side fighter, even as the defending champion. He fought Luke Campbell in Luke Campbell's neck of the woods.
So now, as a challenger, I don't think he's afraid to travel to face a champion.
If all that stands between Vasyl Lomachenko and the belts that he used to hold in that dream of becoming an undisputed champion in this division, this being a part of it, if all that stands between Vasyl Lomachenko and getting his belts back is a trip to Australia, I'm pretty sure Vasyl Lomachenko don't mind getting that passport out.
That's why he's an easy fighter to like.
Why he is an easy fighter to appreciate. I reiterate, he was willing to defend his crown in Luke Campbell's neck of the woods. Back when Teofimo Lopez
Before he lost.
had those belts, he wasn't willing to travel to George Kambosos' neck of the woods in defense of those belts, the way that Vasyl Lomachenko did with Luke Campbell.
Did you guys forget that that was one of the issues?
Back when Triller still had the rights to Lopez versus Kambosos, did you guys forget that that was one of the issues the fight faced? That was one of the delays.
Lopez didn't want to travel.
No, I'm no Vasyl Lomachenko fanatic, but I'm not a malcontent either. There's a lot to appreciate in this fighter.